The moment the dreadnought touched down on Corlock 7's rocky shore, a pulse of static crackled through the communications system. Commander Alex Lex Mason glanced at the control panel, his eyes narrowing. The transmission from Earth had been cut off as soon as they entered the planet's atmosphere, leaving them isolated. The alien council was watching from orbit, their silence deafening. "We're on our own," Lex muttered to himself. The landing had been smooth, but the real danger lay ahead. Outside, the horizon stretched in every direction, a vast, endless ocean interrupted only by jagged cliffs. The water shimmered with an otherworldly, iridescent blue glow, as if the planet itself was alive, pulsing with energy beneath its surface. But it was the storm clouds swirling above that caught Mason's attention. Black and swollen, they churned violently, as if the sky itself was warning them to turn back. "We'll need to get supplies, start mapping, and check the equipment," he ordered, snapping out of his thoughts. He turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Maria Delgado, a no-nonsense former Navy pilot with a reputation for keeping cool under pressure. "Get everyone prepped. We're going in." "Understood, sir," Delgado replied, her voice calm, though her eyes betrayed the tension of the situation. The crew quickly disembarked, donning specialized suits designed to shield them from the planet's toxic air and radiation. As they ventured into the unknown, the sharp smell of ozone mixed with the salty, metallic scent of the ocean. The ground beneath their boots trembled slightly, as if something enormous was shifting beneath them. Suddenly, a low, resonating hum echoed through the air, followed by the sound of distant crashing waves. It wasn't just the ocean. Something in the depths was stirring. Mason's instincts kicked in. This wasn't just any hostile world. It was a predator. "Stay sharp," he growled. "This planet is alive, and it doesn't want us here." This continuation sets the stage for an ominous and dangerous exploration, while focusing on the tension and uneasy atmosphere of the planet. Mason's leadership is established, and the crew is plunged into a world that seems to be pushing back against them from the start. The first few days on Corlock 7 were hell. The ocean's surface seemed placid enough from a distance, but it hid violent currents and underwater currents that could tear through even the most advanced ship hulls. It was as if the planet itself was actively trying to drown them. "Another ship's gone offline," Lieutenant Delgado reported, her face tight with frustration as she monitored the fleet's status from the command center. "We've lost power to Titan." Mason stood silently for a moment, then turned to face his crew. The damage was mounting. Corlock 7 wasn't just a death world. It was a death trap. Every hour, something else malfunctioned. Radiation from the planet's atmosphere scrambled their systems. Life support flickered. The sea itself seemed determined to swallow them whole. Dr. Rachel Turner, the biologist on the expedition, entered the command center, her boots echoing on the metal floor. "Commander," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "I've analyzed the samples we gathered from the water. It's worse than we thought." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Worse? I thought we were dealing with an alien ecosystem that just wanted to eat us." Turner's face was grim. "Yes, but there's something else. It's not just the physical dangers. The water's filled with traces of a substance, possibly a bioweapon. We're talking about a compound that can suppress the immune system and break down neural pathways. It's similar to the ancient virus the ruins mentioned, the one the previous civilization fell to." A chill ran through the crew. The Blue Death wasn't just a myth, it was real. "We need to get back to the ships now," Mason ordered, his voice low but firm. "We're not just fighting the ocean, we're fighting something that could break us from the inside. If this planet kills the mind before the body, then we need to stay sharp. The air around them hummed with tension as they geared up for their next move. The clock was ticking. Time was not their ally. In this continuation, the crew begins to fully realize the danger of Corlock 7, with the introduction of the virus that slowly breaks down the mind and body. The stakes are elevated, and Mason's leadership is put to the test as the true nature of the planet's threat becomes clear. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through Mason's boots as he stood on the bridge of the dreadnought, staring at the ocean beyond. He could feel it. Something was watching them. The air was too still, too heavy. It started with a low rumble, deep and guttural, vibrating through the hull. It wasn't just the water moving, it was something much bigger. A shadow shifted beneath the surface, enormous, a shape far too massive to be anything natural. Then it breached. The creature that rose from the depths was a nightmare. Its body was long, segmented, like a massive serpent, but with armor-like plating along its spine, reflecting the shimmering blue of the ocean. Its mouth, a gaping maw full of jagged, serrated teeth, opened wide, and it let out a roar that shook the dreadnought to its core. "Brace for impact," Mason shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The crew scrambled to their stations as the massive sea creature lunged toward the ship, its jaws snapping inches from the hull. For a brief, terrifying moment, it seemed like the creature was going to tear the ship apart. But Mason's mind was already working. His instincts kicked in. He ordered all secondary engines to power up, pushing the ship into a hard evasive maneuver. The dreadnought lurched to the side as the creature's teeth scraped across the side of the ship, leaving deep gouges in the metal. "Deploy harpoons," Mason barked, knowing they needed to buy time. The crew fired harpoons, large, reinforced projectiles meant for terrestrial wildlife, but the creature was too massive to be stopped by ordinary weapons. The battle became a blur of frantic calculations and violent counterattacks. Mason and Delgado directed fire, focusing on the creature's soft underbelly, hoping to wound it enough to drive it away. But the creature didn't retreat. Instead, it turned, its monstrous tail whipping the water, sending shockwaves through the fleet. Another ship, Vanguard, was caught in the wake, the hull crumpling like paper as the beast's tail struck. "All hands to battle stations." Delgado's voice rang out as the true cost of their mission became apparent. They weren't just explorers, they were prey. In this continuation, the intensity escalates as the crew faces their first major physical challenge. The battle with the sea creature introduces the unforgiving nature of Corlock 7, while highlighting Mason's quick thinking and leadership under pressure. The stakes are raised further as the humans realize they are truly outmatched by the planet's wild, deadly creatures. The crew was reeling from the creature's attack, its damage still fresh, but Commander Mason knew they couldn't afford to wait. They had to push forward. Dr. Turner had insisted they investigate an ancient facility buried deep beneath the ocean floor, a place that might hold the key to understanding the Blue Death virus. Mason and his team suited up again, knowing the risks. The dreadnought's crew had suffered casualties, but not enough to stop them. The mission wasn't over yet. "We're going in. We need answers," Mason told his officers. Delgado nodded, already preparing the dive team. They boarded the submersible, a sleek, black vessel designed for high-pressure exploration. As it descended into the cold, crushing depths, the ocean seemed to close in around them, an immense, silent pressure that grew with every meter. The ruins were enormous, an alien city, half submerged in the deep. The buildings were made of a material that shimmered faintly, like mother of pearl, and the structures looked as though they'd been abandoned for millennia. It was beautiful in an unsettling way, a quiet testament to the civilization that had once thrived here. They docked near what appeared to be a research facility, its entrance marked by alien symbols etched in the stone. As they entered, the oppressive silence of the depths seemed to swallow them whole. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of decay, but the lights flickered to life as they moved deeper into the complex. "We're getting closer," Turner murmured, her voice strained with excitement and caution. She led them down a corridor lined with faded data terminals and strange machines, all covered in a strange, bioluminescent moss. At the end of the hall, they found what they were looking for, a massive containment chamber. Inside, suspended in a liquid-filled vat, was something that looked like a mutated version of the creature they'd fought above, only this one was dead, preserved for study. Turner approached the glass, her face pale. "This is it. This is where it started. The virus. It was weaponized, and it's still here." Mason's stomach sank. "Then we're not just fighting the planet. We're fighting something that could follow us home." In this continuation, the stakes are raised even higher as the crew uncovers evidence of the virus's origins, hinting that Korok 7's true danger may not just be the environment, but a malevolent, engineered force. The team is now dealing with an ancient biological weapon, and the clock is ticking before they risk unleashing it back into the galaxy. The discovery of the containment chamber sent a shockwave through the crew. The Blue Death was not just a natural phenomenon. It had been crafted, manipulated, and weaponized. The knowledge was enough to chill even Mason, but what disturbed him more was the feeling that they were being watched. As the team returned to the surface, still processing what they'd uncovered, tensions between the crew were rising. The mission was spiraling out of control, and not just because of the alien virus. Something else was wrong. It wasn't just the planet that had begun to break them, it was their own people. Lieutenant Delgado had noticed it first. "Sir, we've got a problem," she said, urgency in her voice. "Harris is acting strange. He's been cutting communications, working off the books. I think he's hiding something." Mason turned, his eyes narrowing. Lieutenant James J.D. Harris had always been one of his most reliable officers, loyal, steady, and calm under pressure. But now Mason could sense it. Something was off. He called Harris to his quarters. The moment the lieutenant walked in, Mason noticed the tension in his posture, the way his eyes darted to the corner of the room. Something wasn't right. "What's going on, Harris?" Mason demanded, his voice low, but firm. "You've been out of contact for hours. You're supposed to be monitoring the perimeter." Harris hesitated, and for a moment, Mason saw something flicker behind his eyes. Guilt. Fear. The lieutenant took a deep breath, his face falling into an expression Mason had never seen before, resigned, almost defeated. "I'm sorry, Commander," Harris said quietly. "I didn't want you to know, but I'm not here for the mission. I'm here to take the virus back, alive for Earth's government." Mason froze, his mind racing. "What do you mean? You've been helping us fight the creatures, the virus, this entire time." Harris nodded slowly, but his eyes never met Mason's. "I was. But I'm not just a soldier. I'm a specialist. Earth wants this virus as a weapon. I was sent to retrieve it, at any cost." Mason's blood ran cold. A traitor, right under his nose. "You've put all of us at risk," Mason growled, his fist clenching. "Do you have any idea what you've unleashed here?" Harris's eyes were hollow, his voice breaking. "I thought I could control it. I thought we could use it to save humanity. By using it to destroy everyone else." Mason snapped, his voice like a whip. "You've betrayed your entire crew." But before Mason could react, Harris lunged, knocking Mason off balance and running for the door. In this continuation, the sense of danger and betrayal comes to the forefront as Harris's true intentions are revealed. The shift from fighting external threats to internal conflict raises the stakes for the crew, as they now have to deal with a traitor in their midst, while still grappling with the deadly planet around them. Mason's leadership is tested on a new level, with trust breaking down even among his own team. Mason was still reeling from Harris's betrayal, the weight of it pressing on his chest like a vice. But there was no time to dwell. The planet had already claimed one of their own, and now it was beginning to take more. The crew was unraveling. The first signs had been subtle, a few members of the team showing signs of fatigue, their eyes distant, their movements sluggish. Then it was something worse. As Turner continued her research on the virus, she uncovered a horrifying detail. The Blue Death wasn't just killing. It was breaking down the neural pathways in the brain, eroding the very essence of a person's will to survive. "It's like it's rewriting their minds," Turner explained, her voice thick with dread. "It's not just a physical infection. It goes after the core of your consciousness, your sense of purpose, of hope. You start to lose yourself." Mason's jaw clenched. They'd seen it already. Delgado had been the first to show the effects. The once strong lieutenant had begun to withdraw, eyes clouded with doubt. Then, one by one, the others followed. Soldiers who had once fought with unwavering determination now stared blankly into space, as though waiting for something to end. The real terror, though, was that Mason could feel it too. The sense of despair, the nagging urge to just lie down and surrender to the planet's suffocating grip. It wasn't just the crew's minds that were faltering, it was his own. "Commander," Delgado said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped into his quarters, her eyes hollow, but there was a cold determination there too. "We need to leave. We're not going to make it. The virus is spreading. Some of the crew, they're not coming back." Mason had to steady himself. He couldn't afford to let this planet win. He had to push forward. "I'm not leaving anyone behind," he replied, his voice a low growl. "We have to fight this, all of us." But as the days wore on, it became clear that the virus was relentless, and it was only a matter of time before the planet broke them completely. With Harris still at large and the crew fracturing, Mason knew that they couldn't stay here much longer. But the deeper threat remained. They still had no way to stop the Blue Death from spreading beyond Corlock 7. In this continuation, the psychological toll of the Blue Death begins to take its full effect on the crew. The idea of surrendering to the planet becomes a tangible fear, and Mason's resolve is tested as his crew's mental state deteriorates. This deepens the story's tension, as the threat is no longer just physical, it's psychological, a battle within their own minds. The ocean depths felt colder now, not from the water, but from the overwhelming sense of dread. Corlock 7 wasn't just a death world, it was a place where hope went to die. Yet Mason couldn't allow himself to fall into that same abyss. He couldn't. The crew, now reduced to a few loyal survivors, gathered in the war room. The situation had grown dire. The virus was taking hold faster than anyone had anticipated, spreading through the ranks like wildfire. Some of the men and women Mason had led into battle had already given in, their eyes vacant, their will shattered. And still, Harris was out there, somewhere in the wilds of Corlock 7, a wild card with the virus, and an agenda of his own. "How long do we have before the virus completely overwhelms us?" Mason asked Dr. Turner, his voice tight with suppressed urgency. "Not much longer," she replied, her face pale, her hands shaking slightly. "I've been working on a cure, but the Blue Death, it adapts too quickly. It's evolving. Each time we think we understand it, it mutates into something worse." "Then we have to do something drastic," Mason said, his gaze hardening. He slammed his fist on the table. "We've seen the lab. The Blue Death was created here. It's not just some random disease. It's a weapon, and we're sitting on top of it. We have to destroy it, or it will follow us back to Earth." Turner nodded reluctantly. "The core of the virus, the thing that's keeping it alive, is tied to a massive bioengine deep beneath the planet. If we can destroy that core, we can stop it from spreading. But we'll need to destroy the entire complex, or it'll regenerate itself. That means detonating the reactor." The solution was terrifyingly simple and suicide. A suicide mission. But Mason had seen the alternative. The Blue Death would never stop. It would break them all, piece by piece, until nothing was left. "We go in, we destroy the core, and we get the hell off this rock," Mason said, his voice steady. "Now or never." The crew, exhausted but resolute, nodded in grim agreement. This was their last chance. In this continuation, the sense of finality intensifies. The crew, now down to a handful of survivors, faces the daunting task of not just surviving, but stopping the very virus that threatens them. The last-ditch effort to destroy the virus at its core leads to a suicidal, high-stakes mission with no guarantee of survival, pushing the human spirit to its absolute limits. The final mission had begun. Time was running out, and Mason knew that whatever happened next, this would be their last stand. They made their way through the cavernous halls of the alien facility, the once sturdy walls now cracked and decaying under the strain of millennia. The power was dim, but the glow of bioluminescent moss guided their path, casting eerie shadows along the cold, slick floors. The core was deep within the complex, somewhere beneath the ancient reactor, buried in the heart of the planet. Delgado led the way, her every step resolute, though her face was drawn with exhaustion. Turner, despite the fear in her eyes, clutched a data pad close to her chest, analysing the plans they'd stolen from the research chamber. Behind them, the last few crew members, those who hadn't succumbed to the virus, moved with mechanical precision. No one spoke. Their resolve was all they had left. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the facility, followed by an unmistakable guttural growl. A massive figure stepped out from the shadows, a creature twisted and mutated by the Blue Death. It had the body of a sea serpent, but its eyes were human-like, vacant, its movements jerky and unnatural. It was one of them, one of their own crew members, now twisted beyond recognition, consumed by the virus. "Move!" Mason shouted, but it was too late. The creature lunged, its elongated limbs reaching out with terrifying speed. Mason reacted instinctively, drawing his sidearm and firing into the beast's chest. But it kept coming, relentless, its form shifting as it moved, its mind gone, replaced by the virus. The crew opened fire, but nothing seemed to slow it down. "Keep going," Mason ordered, his voice rough. "We can't stop it now." They pushed forward, hearts pounding, knowing they had no other choice. The further they went, the more the facility seemed alive, shuddering, pulsing, like the planet itself was trying to stop them. And then they found it. The core. Turner moved to the control panel, her hands trembling as she initiated the sequence to overload the reactor. 5 minutes, she said, her voice tight with fear. Mason turned to face the oncoming wave of infected creatures. "Hold them off. We do this together." As the countdown began, the The first blast rocked the complex. The Blue Death had begun its final death rattle. In this continuation, the team's final battle unfolds as they confront the terrifying consequences of the Blue Death. As they fight their way toward the core, they are confronted not just by the infected creatures, but by the realization that survival will come at a terrible cost. This last mission, full of chaos and desperation, sets the stage for the explosive conclusion of their fight for survival.